Good afternoon. We're just going to give it a few seconds just to let everyone connect. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Always great to have the countdown till we go live. Okay, I think we can kick things off. So good afternoon and welcome to IAB Europe's Industry Insider webinar in collaboration with Samsung. My name is Helen Muzzard and I'm thrilled to be your host for this exciting session where we will be delving into the anatomy of a streamer. We've got the privilege today of being joined by Rob Turnbull, who is the Insights lead at Samsung Ads, and he will be unveiling their latest analysis, which has been derived from first-party data that they've collected from nearly 9 million Samsung TVs in the UK. The report offers a great perspective of how app surfing is reshaping smart TV behaviours. And then following Rob's presentation, we will be joined for a fireside discussion, which is going to be hosted by IAB Europe's Chief Economist Daniel Knapp, and he will be joined by two distinguished experts in our field. So we have Kasia from BBC Studios and also Jenn from Samsung TV Plus. And together, the three of them will be unveiling the intricacies of the streaming ecosystem and trying to shed light on this the rapid ascent of fast TV. So we are live today and we will be recording this session. If we'll be placing it onto our website and it will be up on YouTube and also on our social channels so you can access it there on demand. So without further ado, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Rob Turnbull for his presentation.
Thank you, Helen. I'm just going to share my screen now, so bear with. Helen, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Perfect, Rob, you're good to go.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to quickly take a minute to thank the IAB for hosting us today. I'm really excited to bring Anatomy of a Streamer, the white paper, to the IAB event to share it with you all and to talk through some of the really interesting insights into the changing landscape of streaming. A couple upfront notices. It is for the UK only right now, but we will be localizing this across EU5. So we'll be able to share a white paper with similar insights for Germany, Spain, France, and Italy in the not too distant future. So I'm really excited about that. And then also this is a condensed version. So the full white paper will be available after the call and is more extensive than this. So this is more of just a tease. I will get to the next slide if I can. There we go. Up front, I just wanted to share some kind of key insights and implications for all of the data that I'll share with you. And we'll go back to this at the summary as well. But what you can expect from the following presentation is, firstly, that younger audiences are generally streaming more. Specifically, Gen Z and millennials are becoming harder to reach for your linear campaigns in terms of advertisers. And there's a higher chance of them becoming more exclusively OTT in terms of their content consumption in the near future. Secondly to that, we know that SVOD leads the way in terms of app categories, but we are seeing a significant amount of growth amongst FAST and AVOD, and there are many reasons why, and I'll dive in a little bit about that. A really interesting point we're going to pick up as well is around how certain app categories are filling different use cases in people's weeks and days as well. And we'll be looking at day part and week part splits between that. But generally, the biggest insight that I want everyone to take away from this presentation is that app-based usage and streaming generally is growing, as well as smart TV penetration growing more generally in the UK. And this means that consumers are becoming slightly less reliant on things like set-top boxes to access their favorite OTT content. So I just wanted to quickly introduce the source of all of our first-party data, and that's made up in the UK of around 9 million smart TVs. I also wanted to say is that through third parties like GWI, we know that this audience generally are more likely to be early adopters and are more likely to be following the latest in terms of technology trends. So we do believe that the insights that we're going to share with you that generally reflect back on H1 2023 will be future-proof and forward-facing for the general population. So another kind of exciting in terms of the trends that we'll be able to share. So what we know generally, I think lots of people anecdotally will know this as well, is that amongst our Samsung TV universe, the vast proportion of people are streaming. 84% in fact are streaming, and that in itself represents about 11% year-on-year growth. But what we really wanted to dive into and understand more is what does that look like for individual streamers, and what we've been able to do, and what is unique as a kind of hardware manufacturer with this level of data, is to understand that anatomy of a streamer. And that's why we've called this presentation what it is today. What we can see is the level and distinctness in those streaming sessions where people are only consuming OTT content. In terms of the average Samsung streamer, what that looks like is around 8 streaming sessions per week, and about 122 minutes per streaming session, regardless of what app they're in. And actually what gives us a lot of confidence, especially when we're reporting in the UK, is that this is kind of very close to and reflective of reports like the Ofcom Media Nations report and some of the stuff that they've produced in terms of data for streaming sessions that is eerily similar to this. So in terms of the total amount of streaming sessions that we saw in H1 2023, we're seeing a huge explosion of that. We've seen a significant amount of growth, and in fact, we saw about 927 million sessions in the UK alone in H1 2023. And we only expect this to grow and become a more, certainly a larger number in the near future. What we really wanted to do, and I think it's more important for when brands in particular are considering some of the insights in terms of where they want to place and plan their advertising campaigns, is not only or what amount of people are streaming, but actually what proportion of people are spending the majority of their time streaming, what people would historically call like cord cutters, and wouldn't actually be seeing or being exposed to that much linear content, and kind of linked to that the likelihood of them being exposed to linear advertising campaigns. So we've been able to produce this figure and see this within the Samsung TV universe. Over half of our universe in the UK is now people that are spending the majority of their time streaming over watching linear or using their TV in another way. And that's not just that people are streaming and dipping in and out, they're using and spending a significant amount of time watching that OTT content. They use, on average in September 23, they were streaming for about 81 hours across the whole month. So you can see that that's a really persistent behavior, and one, again, that we expect to grow. And one of the kind of key takeaways of this is how can we understand this in terms of what that looks like across different generations? And we've used a third party in that to kind of quantify that a little bit more. So GWI have told us for the UK, when they asked their panel about what kind of consumption habits were across, in terms of streaming, were across different generations, that most extreme and the highest likelihood of those that are streaming would be within Gen Z. And that's because I think they've grown up with the option of having OTT content surrounded by OTT content, whether that's on their mobile, whether that's on TV. It's a very natural environment to be in, and they don't really haven't really fully embraced linear in the same way. So GWI tell us that on average, Gen Z self-reported are spending about 2 hours and 5 minutes streaming per day. Millennials slightly less, an hour and 44. Gen X, again, slightly less, an hour and 19, and then about 53 minutes for boomers. And that's not to say that the older generations aren't streaming. It's just to say that that's a more extreme behavior the younger you go. And then potentially for brands, what that might mean in terms of an implication of this is that, and I'm sure this is reflective of some of the ad campaigns that many of you have run, is that these younger audiences are becoming harder to reach with your traditional linear campaigns. We also wanted to just not look at streaming as a whole. We wanted to break that down into the different app categories. And a really interesting view of that is where we split up and compare time spent across SVOD, AVOD and FAST, and BVOD. Looking at Q2 2023 using our first party data and that Samsung TV universe, we can still see that SVOD, which has traditionally held the majority, still hold that almost, but very closely followed by the others. So about 51% of total time spent across our TVs was spent when streaming was spent in SVOD. AVOD follows with about 40% of that, and then BVOD, smaller again for the UK, about 9%. But what is really interesting is when you flip that and look at the total growth in time spent, Q2 2022 to Q2 2023, actually the growth areas are not in SVOD. So AVOD grew about 18% in time spent, BVOD about 24%, and then fast about 32%. So a real increase in acceleration in adoption of fast there. SVOD did grow a little bit, but you can see that potentially SVOD in terms of time spent is plateauing. So given that we've identified that potentially SVOD's plateauing, we wanted to understand if that was actually leading to an increase in subscriptions and what an increase in cancellations of people's subscription, and what were the main drivers of that. So Kantar themselves actually were able to confirm that in Q2 2023 there was about a 10% increase in subscription cancellations. And for the panel and their survey base, when they asked the questions, oh, how likely are you to switch your subscription to a different service, about 48% of people agree that they would. So we know that obviously there's potential plateauing in SVOD. People are likely now to switch between subscriptions. So what we wanted to follow that up with is really understand and dig into what the main drivers of cancellation of people's streaming services would be. I think what didn't surprise us is that cost was the primary factor in driving. And that has so much to do with, in the UK, as well as kind of globally, not just the cost of living crisis, but people being more critical of what they're spending money on. So cost came out generally as the highest driver of switching streaming services. But a new behavior that certainly I'm really interested in investigating further is the likelihood of content actually being the driver of people's cancellation. What we're seeing in terms of a behavior change is that people are following shows, essentially either new shows or historic content that is a real driver of awareness amongst some different apps. Actually, that's the likelihood of that being a driver of someone switching apps is certainly growing. And I think that that's a really interesting insight that we're definitely going to, in follow-up white papers, probably dig into a little bit more. So now we know that people are kind of more likely to cancel their subscriptions, and it's driven by cost and content. What we also want to understand is, like, from our own first-party data, we wanted to quantify if someone was to churn through an app, if someone was to exit an app, what's the likelihood, or how long on average does it take for them before returning to that app? And you can see that actually it's surprisingly long. So if someone was to cancel their subscription for Netflix, as an example, it would take them on average, if they were to return, about 5 months before they were to return to the app. And you can see that obviously that has implication in terms of the strategies of the different apps and how they acquire and retain their users. And we're seeing that play out in real life more and more, especially when we're thinking about Disney Plus and Netflix launching ad-supported tiers of their own subscription services in the UK. I feel like that's a real reflection of some of this behavior change. So if someone is likely to be more critical of what apps they're using, especially with SVOD, what we wanted to understand then is, what does the breakdown of someone's roster of apps actually look like? And it is in fact that there is certainly a roster that gets consistently switched between across many of our Samsung TVs. So about 86% of our owners split their time across different apps, and that's not a surprise to anyone. About 14% always visit the same app, so a very small proportion of people are only going to one place. So a Netflix or a Disney Plus, like, being obviously the most prominent of these, the likelihood is that people aren't going to them and only them. What we are seeing is that the real players are dominating in terms of that time spent. So I think it's fair to say that of people's rosters, they're using multiple apps. They're not likely to use just one, but usually it's a group of 10 that is really having the majority of time spent that people are swapping between. And that led us to the question of, like, over the course of a year, how many on average in terms of the number of apps that people are using. And a really interesting stat that we pulled out from our first party data was that on average it's between 4 and 5 apps over the course of a year that make up people's roster. you can see that actually there is, and what we've seen is also is there's a growing amount of people that are, 5, 6, 7, even 9, 10. So actually, there's a growing population of people that are using more, and that actually is really interesting, and that it kind of flies in the face of some insight and some thought leadership that we had from within the sector within maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where someone I know I was many different kind of research festivals where people were talking about how the likelihood of someone using more than 2 apps at any point in their kind of TV usage as being really alien and something no one ever would consider. And that kind of definitely flies in the face of that now. People are open to using multiple different apps and switching between them in their roster of apps. We also wanted to understand then of that, say 4 apps, what's the breakdown across those app categories? What apps are people most likely to use if they're using an average of 4? And you can see that we've been able to work out the average Samsung TV owner of those 4 apps. One is always going to be BVOD, so an ITVX, a Channel 4, a My5, or a BBC iPlayer. One is always going to be an AVOD, so Samsung TV Plus, Pluto, or a YouTube, and then 2 are going to be SVOD, the likelihood of them being a Netflix, a Prime Video, or an Apple TV Plus. And then lastly, I think we wanted to also understand the discovery journey and the user journey of people within the streaming session, when we know that people are the likelihood of them switching between apps is really high. One of the really interesting ones, and again, another piece of insight that we want to follow up with, another piece of research we want to follow up with is the likelihood of people and the discovery journey becoming frustrated or regretted in terms of the times that they're spending between apps. And actually what we found is there's this, loop behavior that is often happening when people are having streaming sessions. So for streaming sessions where people use 3 or more apps, only 39% will use 3 unique apps, and most likely the majority of people will go from one app to another one and then back to the first app. Again, a good example of kind of the way in which people rotate through different apps. And this also, going back in terms of insight into some of the top line ones I called out as having significant implications to the market, is the kind of growing behavior of people fitting different app categories in different times of their day and different times of their week. So I guess what we've seen in terms of the daily schedule is that between linear, SVOD, and BVOD, actually they're following the kind of traditional prime time viewing behavior. So the likelihood of people is that they're going to sit down and they're going to watch the content they want to watch between 8 and 10 p.m. every single day. And that's like the quality content that they're really like making a moment in their day to sit down and concentrate for and focus on. But with AVOD, there's not really the same behavior. It's not really reflective of AVOD. Actually, what we're seeing is that the peak time is slightly earlier in the day. And actually, when I take you through to another graph, a really interesting thing is the likelihood of AVOD specifically being more a daytime viewing app category rather than really contending with the prime time that you see with linear, SVOD, and BVOD. When you kind of look at the weekly schedule as well, a really interesting insight is around the peaking of different consumption generally around the weekends. So Saturday and Sunday is the peak day across every single type of content consumption. But one thing that increases more than any other, and this is down, I guess, anecdotally, I would say down to the binge effect, certainly something that I do, is SVOD is growing more than any other. So 27% increase in SVOD usage when you compare Friday, Saturday, Sunday versus weekdays. And that's more in terms of consumption at the weekend than any of the other apps. And the last slide here is just breaking it down by the barb day part. This is an indexed view, so the lines represent whether something's more or less likely to be used at any moment throughout a day. You can see that the really light blue line that sits above the others in terms of breakfast, daytime, and passing into peak represents AVOD, and that kind of goes back to the point that I made around the likelihood of it being more of a daytime viewing experience. But then when you switch that up and look at SVOD, linear, and BVOD, you can see that that peak is in that prime time slot, and it's significantly higher than some of the others. A really interesting one that we're going to dig more into as well is how gaming fits in with this. Obviously, Samsung TVs are used by gamers, and we want to understand how that, in terms of the consumption of gaming, also differs in terms of like time of day and week. And I think we're going to follow up with this as well in later versions of our white paper on potentially next year on gamers specifically. But what you see with this is that it doesn't quite contend with the peak around prime time, but actually the likelihood is they're going to be using it closer and like more consistently through the night. So just an interesting tidbit there. So just going back to those keynotes and implications, and like I said, this is a condensed version, and there's more, even more in our proper white paper that I'm sure will be shared after this call, is that younger audiences are continuing to, I guess, represent a challenge to brands and advertisers. And that's because they're more likely to be exclusively watching OTT content, and so less likely to be reached with your traditional linear campaigns. Secondly, SVOD is leading the way in terms of the majority of time spent for app categories, but we're seeing a lot of growth with FAST and AVOD. We're seeing, you know, like I've just gone through, lots of apps fitting certain times in people's day and week. But generally, I think the biggest takeaway I want people to take away is that that streaming is surging pretty rapidly. The adoption of smart TVs is increasing as well, and what we're seeing as well is that the newer the smart TV, the newer the smarter TV, the more likely someone is to kind of be streaming. And that means that people are less reliant on things like set-top boxes to access their favorite content. So that's a real quick stop shop. And with that, I'll pass back to Helen.
Thank you so much, Rob. And it's really nice to have some more up-to-date information and stats. You're completely correct. I think I was still in my head always saying that people have a max of 2 or 3 subscriptions. So it's really reassuring now to know that, you know, the average is actually 4 or 5. So really interesting stats. And you're right, we will be providing a link. Anyone watching this now on demand, you'll be able to find it at the bottom of the webpage, and anyone that's subscribed to join this webinar will be sending the report out there. So yeah, big thank you, Rob. You've given the panel, I'm already thinking of so many questions, but I'm going to pass over now to Daniel Knapp, who is our Chief Economist, for his fireside chat with Kasia and Jenn. So over to you, Daniel, to introduce your panelists.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Rob. As an economist, there were, of course, lots of exciting statistics in there. I must say the kind of richness of the data to help kind of understand kind of emerging viewing behaviors is quite exceptional, and will really inform, I think, lots of strategies around monetization, content creation, etc. So thanks again, Rob. I'd now like to invite on the virtual stage Kasia Jablonska, who is the Director of Digital and OnDemand at BBC Studios. I'm very keen to hear what BBC Studios have to say about this. And then from Samsung TV Plus, Jenn Batty, who is the Head of Content. Going to have a lot to say about how these viewing behaviors link to specific content categories. Welcome to both of you. And Kasia, I would love to start with you. You've seen the statistics that that Rob has shared. What really stood out to you in terms of the shifting viewing behavior that Rob mentioned, and how does that correlate with what you are seeing yourself at BBC Studios?
Hello, and once more, thank you for inviting me to join this fireside chat. So yeah, basically Samsung white paper validates everything which we have been noticing quite recently. The audience profile presented is quite interesting. This is, you know, the 90% are the early adopters, 55% are the affluent ABC One households, 44 years old, over-index. It is this elusive audience, difficult to capture in a more traditional environment. So CTVs give us a really great opportunity to engage with those audiences and to effectively follow them wherever they currently are. And basically this kind of BBC Studios, just following all those kind of behaviors and trends we've been seeing, BBC Studio is changing the way we think about our content distribution. So we definitely want to follow the audiences wherever they are and wherever they choose to watch the content. And we serve those audiences kind of in their preferred consumption format. Everything in a way starts with an IP, and we then take a very kind of cautious, curated view of where this IP should be kind of travel, where the IP should travel from the linear proposition, which is still very strong. But we know that only certain audiences can be captured them through then fast SVOD everywhere where we see those audiences are and wherever we know we can access them.
And I think one of the interesting stats that Rob mentioned was about shifts both in the volume of users that we see, of course, coming on smart TV, but also fundamentally the changing patterns on how users who are already on smart TV engage with the device and the schedule. From your perspective, Kasia, what do you find more exciting? More users coming on, or the changing behaviors in terms of how many apps they use, kind of the daytime, when they come back to apps that they've churned, etc.?
All of this is really interesting and in many ways new to content owners like BBC Studios, or to that respect, any other similar studios. First of all, an earlier prime time give us a really good opportunity to capture those audiences earlier in the day and help to redirect them to a different sort of viewing pattern like linear or SVOD. And we can do it in a very easy way, thanks to Samsung TV, multiple different tools. This is like a completely new area for us to learn from, but we definitely are learning a lot. And as a good example here is obviously the kind of enhanced metadata, UI merchandising, a single sort of search ecosystem, voice search, all those functions which Samsung TV is currently investing heavily with, and we partner with them to be able to create a bigger, sort of more advanced discoverability of our content and be able to exactly just shift that content from one viewing model to another.
Right. And we're coming to content discoverability in a second, but I think you mentioned something quite intriguing here, and which is about the earlier prime time, and they're using it to shift audiences to other platforms, right? So let's think of the total video experience for a second. Let's say linear television. We got kind of different devices, different kind of on-demand systems, and there was a time where, in a sense, viewing behavior had to be accepted, right? It had to be, was driven by the user, and content creators, advertisers and broadcasters or content publishers had to react to it. But when you now say we're using that to shift people to other platforms based on data, there seems to be an kind of inversion of the relationship, where it's not just about which content fits which platforms, but how do I proactively orchestrate user experiences and user journeys across my device universe. Is that experimental, or is that kind of part of your, in a sense, daily practice already?
We do live in the user-centric world at the moment, and that's effectively what matters. And as from our perspective, every content owner has to understand where those users are, what are their different behaviors, different content consumptions pattern, and arrange our content around it. And I would say we probably are still experimenting to a certain extent, because this is such an early stage of this journey. However, we know that this is really important. It's important for us to engage with the platforms such as Samsung TVs, because those are the platforms that provide a lot of really new kind of interactive tools, allowing us to to access those audiences in multiple different ways. But the strategy going forward is definitely make sure we kind of center our content around the viewing behaviors.
Let me jump to Jennifer. You, of course, have a whole view kind of across the UK, across other markets, kind of different content owners. When you look at the statistics that Rob showed, what kind of strikes you most in terms of the changes that the data shows in terms of viewing behavior?
When we look at the data here in the office and what the different white papers that Samsung Ads comes up with, I think it's really exciting. We're at a really exciting venture or positioning of the connected TV and fast TV and AVOD, because as Rob was saying, we talk about the increase in viewing. It's a younger audience that they're streaming. They're slightly harder to reach, and we're now able to deliver that audience to advertisers. So it's really exciting to see that. And as we've seen over the last year, it's going up and up. The streaming centric viewers, the time spent is higher, the more content that they're consuming is higher. More viewers are switching from sort of traditional or SVOD viewing to the free environment because, let's face it, the economy is tough out there. Subscription prices are expensive. And when the consumers are now coming into the fast environment, the quality of content has changed so much over the last few years that some of the content they're able to access is absolutely incredible. Whether it's content that we partner with BBC for single IPs like Top Gear, or if it's award-winning series that we have on the different channels, from Mad Men to Schitt's Creek to Jamie Oliver, the content has seen a big step change. So I think from the consumer's point, what they're seeing is incredible content that they're able to access for free. It's a slightly younger demographic, which is harder to reach, and now we have an ability to reach them. And I think it's really complementing sort of the way that the evolution of television is going.
Let's stay for a second with the view behavior that you mentioned. Of course, hard to reach demographics. I mean, that's a key selling point of smart TV. We know linear is still extremely strong, but in that niche, it's becoming quite important to have other avenues of reaching them. Now, when we look at these viewing behavior changes, i.e., an earlier prime time, for instance, and different types of demographics using these devices and content quite differently. And also when we see that there's a kind of, in a sense, a concentration of usage on few apps. What are the implications of that for advertisers? How should they engage in reaching these audiences? How do they incorporate these specific patterns of frequency of viewing and the type of viewing into their advertising strategy?
When you're working within sort of Samsung Ads, I think we're in a really unique position for the advertisers, as we can really offer the full ecosystem. It's not just Samsung TV Plus. We are Samsung. We are the #1 manufacturer of connected televisions worldwide. We have a really unique position with the access that we have to first-party data within Samsung. So we are able, the ads team are able to work really closely, not just with what's offered within TV Plus, but also what's offered within Samsung as a television. So I think it's really giving advertisers more insight on what they should be doing. How do they reach the audience that they're trying to target? They're able to do a slightly more targeted reach with their product, with their advertisement within Samsung, and not just within Samsung TV Plus, but within other areas. So they can follow the audience. They're able to do that, which is, I think, a really new, exciting evolution that we're able to do.
And you already mentioned it, both fast channels. They are furiously fast, no pun intended. Haven't seen an explosion of channels recently. Industry headlines full of the growth of fast. We have seen some quite optimistic growth forecasts from analysts, not just in the US now, but also in Europe, about fast monetization, about it providing new avenues for advertisers. At the same time, with, of course, an explosion of content and channels, also comes fragmentation and the issue of differentiation. And I think you both already alluded to the changing nature of the fast market, in particular around the quality of content that has changed. Let's rewind a little bit and see, how do you compare, Kasia, when you looked at fast 2 years ago versus now, what has changed in the channel landscape?
Yeah, so that is actually a really interesting question. From that perspective, looking basically, as you said, fast really exploded only about 2-3 years ago. So it's a relatively new model. However, a lot has changed. When it first started, it definitely was a way of monetizing deep catalog, where hence fast originally was driven by a very kind of sense of nostalgia. And in our case, it's quite visible, because some of the most popular channel we currently have in Europe is the Doctor Who and Top Gear, both single IP channels, and both actually kind of present earlier seasons, start with the earlier season of both of those shows. However, as we kind of went along, very quickly we realized that what the audiences are after and are actually much more premium proposition. They don't really mind having advertising on the channels as long as they can see the quality of the content. And they also, what was really interesting, obviously, the ad breaks are smaller in comparison to the linear television. So a lot is about kind of making sure you have this right balance between the ad break and the quality of the content. So from our perspective, Top Gear, given as an example, as we originally saw, we launched it in a Spanish market. Turned out it was a really huge success. So within last, I would say 8 months, we very successfully rolled it out to a lot of other markets in Europe. At the moment, we are in about 6 markets, because being able to test the brand, premium brand in one market, showing that actually it's a really good opportunity to reach those kind of hard to reach audiences without losing any quality, any kind of recognition of the premium quality of that IP, just the opposite. We actually are able to continue our dialogue with audiences which are not in the traditional kind of medium like linear channels. We can continue attract higher quality of advertisers, which also would now come to programmatic CTV advertising, because they are looking for this premium quality and those hard to reach audiences. So in many ways, it is a win-win situation. And for us, it just proved at the point that it's definitely worth to invest our kind of a high quality premium IP into that space.
And Jennifer, how's the change? Jump in.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just building on from Kasia's comments, I think it is really true. I think sort of 3-4 years ago, the content it's always good content, that, but it was sort of, let's just grab things and put it together on channels. Now there's been such an incredible step change of the quality of content. And you look at, our partnership with BBC, as Kasia was saying, we have Top Gear in some of the countries. We have Doctor Who, which do incredibly well for us as single IP channels. We've also, though, in the last year, we've introduced live football. Not just, we have a channel in Germany that does some of the biggest live football matches across Europe. It's free, it's there, it's not behind the paywall. This is very game changing. We have a partnership with FIFA Plus, where we had some of the Women's World Cup that was free. So these are, the way that the industry is changing and evolving. The content is things that people expect to see behind a paywall, and now they're able to access it for free. So the content is there, the quality of the content is there, and you add that together with things like something like Doctor Who, which has been around for decades, but is such an incredibly loved single IP. People are very much, your parents grew up with it, we grew up with it. Now you have your kids and you want to show them, and this is a great opportunity to do that. So it's a really interesting kind of the way that we're able to bring content within Samsung TV Plus across, the different genres that we have, and really drive viewing and introduce people today to content that is strong IPs that their parents grew up with, and then along with some of the biggest sort of live football matches and movies and different genres that way. So it's really exciting to see that. And what I think is also in the last year that we've seen is a lot of the broadcasters like BBC and Kasia at BBC Studios are embracing the fast world. And they're sort of, I think people previously, some of the broadcasters were a little bit sort of hesitant, a little bit nervous to go into the fast environment. But, now we have a number of relationships in France with TF1, in Germany with ZDF Studios, Spain with RTVE, here in the UK with Channel 4, ITV and BBC, bringing the best content that we can to the fast free environment.
What do you think was the driver for, in a sense, have the big kind of legacy companies that have dominated the TV space for so long to look at this from some skeptical sideshow to something that they want to invest in? Was there a single reason, or was it the combination of the viewing changes and some early adopters that they saw as having successes there? What were the factors?
When you look at the information that Rob presented in an ad-based streamer, that just goes to show that this is where the eyeballs are going. And I think for the bigger sort of Goliaths in the world that have been running sort of the free-to-air market and things like that, they're seeing that, and they're seeing that this is where another way for them to reach these eyeballs. So I think it's just as the industry and people embrace that, the stronger content and the stronger players are coming on board and saying, you know, they want to get these eyeballs. This is the best way to get them.
So we can say diagnosis, content diversification in terms of categories, increase in the quality of content, and in a sense, confidence in the platform to put single IP channels on there. Kasia, anything else? You're nodding. Anything I'm missing there?
Yeah, I think also, you know, human nature, it's really difficult to change when one minute you're dealing with existing relationship and kind of business models which don't really require a lot of work beyond the original fee, which, you know, kind of you just deliver the content to the platform, you pick up your fee, and suddenly you've got a very different model which actually acquires a lot of work with the partner, with the fast partner platforms, to optimize that content whilst it's on the platform, plus sort of open-ended advertising revenues rather than kind of closed fixed fees. Could take a while for content owners to kind of to convince themselves that it's really worth investing in this, but they see, you know, the eyeballs are there, the advertising money is following there. So it's really worth kind of investing with your premium IP proposition into the model, learning new set of skills, and kind of following wherever the audiences are going.
Of course, we have in the fast space the in a sense startup costs to launch a channel are a fraction of what it was in the, of course, in the linear broadcast space. You know, bandwidth limitations notwithstanding, it's very easy, very fast to launch a channel. So we have, of course, seen proliferation of so many different channels. Do we think we have kind of reached kind of peak fast channel availability, or do you see more new channels coming in?
From a Samsung TV Plus, when we look at that, so we are currently in Europe, we're in 16 countries. Each country we have anywhere between 80 to 160, 170 channels. It's really about discoverability. So as long as the viewers can find the content in an easy way, then I think you can have more channels. But we do want to make sure that it's not too hard. We don't want things, you know, the content to get lost. And as Rob was talking about earlier, people come onto an app, they can't find anything, they go somewhere else. You know, they go back and forth between this. We want to make it easier for people to find things. So I think really when you look at the number of channels and the potential for the number of channels and growth in the different countries, it's really about how easy is it for a consumer when they come into the platform to find the content. So from a UI perspective, we've recently launched a couple of new improvements in respect to discoverability to make it easier, so that we have tabs on the left-hand side that make it easier for you to find your content that you're looking for. And I think really every country also is very different. We find, you know, in the US, there are significantly more channels on Samsung TV Plus and the other fast platforms there than we have here in Europe. So it really does, I think it depends on the country and discoverability and strong content. As the stronger the content gets, the more channels that you can bring on board, because it's what people are looking for and is it what's driving the viewing and also the advertising.
Kasia, are you satisfied with discoverability today?
Yes. So basically, from our perspective, first of all, I agree. At the moment, there's a major shift from sort of quantity to quality of content. First of all. Second of all, we kind of look at the fast as, in a way, it's a hybrid model. Obviously, it's channels, but as you say, it's much easier to put those channels on air. It gives us opportunity to get into a new markets and test the waters. It is a really good complementary model for us in Spain, Italy, France, where the major kind of revenue model for us so far has been content sales, but it gives us opportunity to test content, you know, how well it will be will be able to monetize it across the market in new windows. Also, as I was saying, in a way, it's a hybrid model somewhere between channels and YouTube, to the extent that with YouTube, it's also about the scale of inventory and using those different tools to kind of make sure your content is easy to discover. And in that respect, you know, as I was saying before, a really close collaboration with the fast platforms like Samsung to ensure we understand those different tools which can potentially be used. Huge sort of investment in data, metadata, enhanced metadata is effectively becoming a must. And it's not like we can try to do it at the moment. It's one of the key tools which all the content owners have to invest in to be able to drive the viewership of the content and provide advertisers with additional kind of opportunities like sponsorships or content placements. But yeah, it's from that perspective, there's a lot of new skills we have to learn, but it's highly important for us we learn these skills in order to make sure we kind of drive this content to the audiences. As somebody said, the content is maybe the king, but the kind of discoverability, convenience is actually the key, the gatekeeper.
Right. And with many ingredients to discoverability, right? We got what's on the EPG, what are ingrained user habits, do they already know the brand, are they purposely looking for a brand or piece of content, right? Broadcaster brand, for instance, or something like Top Gear, right? Are they looking for genres? Are they looking for reruns, etc.? Now, you mentioned, Kasia, enhanced metadata. Can you shed some light on that? What is that exactly, and what's an example of that?
Yeah, so I would say, again, it's early stage of the journey, I would say, for all content owner. However, it's one of those things we've identified as really extremely important kind of element of our content discoverability. So I would say that there are two elements to this. There's obviously a kind of viewer-facing metadata. So provide building a content, building tagging library. So effectively creating as many tags as possible for each piece of content. So not only providing a basic information about the title, director, actors. At this day and age, you have to be able to basically describe, is it a comedy for women? Is it a comedy for men? Is it a movie where you could cry to? What is your kind of main social demographics? Is it about red cars, classic cars? The more information, the more tags you can attach to the piece of content, the easier will be for audiences to find that piece of content. The other type of metadata is obviously the metadata directed by advertisers, your ability to tag different types of brands within your content, ability to identify different sort of social demographics of viewers' behavior, because then you're able to go to advertiser and say, hey, in this piece of content, I've got different types of classic cars, which might be able to help you build a sponsorship opportunity around it. Those pieces of content, I've got the audiences in this particular age, which again will give advertisers opportunity to sort of create maybe some kind of special campaign around it directed at this group age. And this way you can actually, it helps to kind of move your programmatic pricing from the kind of open market, from the bottom of the programmatic waterfall to the top, to the kind of a guaranteed private market sales.
Bring into advertising monetization, fantastic. That's such an exciting topic. Let's park that for 2 minutes or so. I just see Jenn, you are nodding as Kasia explains metadata. Is this table stakes now? Is every brand, every content owner you work with doing this, or are some more innovative than others in embracing this?
I think some are more innovative than others in embracing this. We're working with all of our content partners to have them deliver as robust metadata as possible as we can for both the viewer and the advertiser. I think it's a work in progress. People are learning and understanding actually the benefit of doing this, but it is also a lot of work for our content providers to do this. So it's a work in progress, but I think it's been really interesting to see even over the last 6 months how that it's strengthening. And I think you'll see when we talk about the number of channels that are out there, this is something that differentiates them. The more information that they can supply, the more metadata that they can supply to us for the EPGs and for the advertisers. And also even things as simple as if you have a series and you can supply us with a thumbnail photo for each episode, when we're doing a VOD rail, and it's there and it's easier for the consumer to see and understand, and it's more attractive for them, and it makes them want to come in and watch, which means that they have more eyeballs, more advertising. All of these things are really working, and it's just about how do they monetize better. So we encourage and push as hard as we can for our partners to supply as much information. It benefits everybody that's out there.
Okay, so we can clearly see from your answers that the content strategy must be followed by a curation strategy, and the combination of those two enhances opportunities for ad monetization, where I think we are at the heart of the discussion. We all know how advertising doesn't just follow eyeballs. We saw that, of course, massive viewing behavior, but there's no automatic following, but it also links to the ability to measure, to understand features, to understand performance, in particular in a time where ad spend is under scrutiny, given CMOs need to often make more with less. So let's talk about advertisers. Clearly, the increase in audience isn't enough for them to go on fast, but it must be other things. What's driving them, and what uses of data do they currently make, Jenn?
As I mentioned earlier, I think from Samsung, we're in a really unique position because we do have access, as Rob was also mentioning in Anatomy of the Streamer, we do have access to a lot of first-party data information that the ad sales team work very closely with doing up the campaign, so that people understand what actually is the reach and where are they going to get, what is the target they are looking for, how are we going to target that across not just one channel, but multiple channels or first screen ad tiles. So I think that, it's a really unique position that I think from a fast environment that we're in. And the data that we can access, again, we're the full ecosystem. We're not just the manufacturer, we're the tech stack, we're everything that's there, including the content. So, the information that the ad sales team can work with the different advertisers is, I think, world-class, and has changed a lot and has evolved a lot over the last few years.
What are some of the best practices in addressing audiences on smart TVs? Would you say it's going into demographic? It's going into contextual around the metadata that Kasia mentioned? Is it going into specific shows? What are the trends?
Everything that you've just said right then and there is exactly, it's evolving, and that's exactly what's happening. A few years ago, say 4 years ago, you would have advertising, which is programmatic. Now it's really, you can come in, you can sponsor a show, you can do something on ground with them, you can sponsor a channel, you can do programmatic sales, depending on what it is that you're looking for, what is the reach that you're looking for with your advertising.
And what about the feedback performance data that advertisers get? Let's imagine, new format on advertising on fast channels. You can sponsor them, you can target ads. How do advertisers make good decisions here to not fall into decision paralysis? What are kind of indicators to say this is the channel you should be sponsoring, or this is the type of audience that performs really well on smart TVs?
I can't really speak on behalf of our ad sales team, but I think that with the data that we have and understanding who our advertisers are and who they are trying to reach, and sort of tagging that with the data that we have, I think gives them a lot more comfort and than say a few years ago, which I think is really good. So I think it really is, with our teams, it's about understanding the advertisers and understanding what and how they're trying to reach, and then working with the different partners that we have out there to make sure that we can deliver that.
Kasia, are you seeing some additional trends?
No, I think Jenn captured quite well basically what those trends are. One thing I would maybe add to this, again, like going back 2-3 years, content owners were quite happy just to hand the content over and pick up the check. At the moment, we actually are getting much closer to the kind of the advertising side of things and working close with the Samsung ad sales teams to basically understand what the advertisers really want, and to make sure that whatever content we deliver and whatever capabilities we deliver is basically works well for both viewers and for the advertisers. And then it's create this perfect environment where we can service both of those groups.
Given we have so many channels, given that advertisers love to connect data and campaigns across different platforms, what are kind of the challenges that they're currently facing in the fast environment? And Jenn, what are you doing to help them navigate this?
That's a really interesting question. And I think, again, it's something, unfortunately, I can't really speak on behalf of the Samsung ads guys directly, but I think that part of the challenges is exactly as Rob was addressing in the anatomy of the streamer sort of white paper, is that, you know, the key takeaways that he had is about the younger audiences are streaming more, that the app usage is growing and is building. So I think for advertisers to understand how the connected TV in the streaming world is changing and evolving, I think is really helping them to understand what they're looking for when they're coming into this environment, and how this really is a great way for an incremental reach for them, or a direct reach if there is a specific audience that they're looking for.
And lastly, to drive further advertising on the platform, let's speak about collaboration. It's clear, you're both on the panel, so already collaboration is happening. But I think what's really interesting is that FAST really remixes the relationship between creation, distribution, monetization, probably connected by insights. So what would be future collaboration models between kind of creators, distributors, and hardware owners? Are there some trends we can see that's different from other domains of the video universe?
I'll let Kasia answer that one first, and then I'll put in my wish list.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I would say, obviously, it is a hybrid model. It is somewhere between to be social media and linear channels. In that perspective, content owners have to be kind of get used to the fact that those channels might be coming and going pretty quickly. Quite often we see, for example, so-called pop-up channels, which are seasonal channels that come up for maybe 2-3 months. And as content owners, we have to be ready to be able to put up and take down those channels pretty quickly. This is something quite unusual in the linear world. We have to be able to continuously come to the fast platforms like Samsung with new content ideas. So in a way, kind of give Samsung opportunity to pick up the titles they really kind of want to work with. Sometimes we might be thinking about the multi-genre channels, while, fast platforms actually think that from their perspective, something would serve better than a single IP channel. Or they see that within the multi-genre channels, a couple of IPs perform much better, and then just decide to pull them up immediately as a single proposition. So there is this kind of ongoing, flexible, fluid approach to basically how you package the channel. And you have to be able to move between FAST and AVOD, which in a way just give the audiences an ability to make this choice where they want to see the content.
I was just going to say, tick, tick, perfect. Those are all the things that we're looking for, and I can't wait to call you right after this. But it really is about embracing fast and being able to make quick decisions and do things slightly outside of the box. I think previously the way that linear television and things like that, things were slower and very much traditional. And within the fast environment, it is about having really, for ourselves, having really strong partnerships with our content providers, so that we can go and do creative, unique, different things that answer what the advertisers are looking for. And of course, what the consumers are looking to watch.
And now each of you, a quick 30-second outlook. How's the fast landscape in the UK going to look like in 2 years' time?
I think it's incredibly exciting. I think that in 2 years, it's really the worlds are going to evolve even more. You're going to see the streaming centric, the numbers are going to be higher than you can even imagine. The quality of the content will be top notch, and really people, I don't think, will really differentiate between watching a linear channel and a fast channel, because of the way that the industry is evolving and the partnerships that are evolving.
Yeah, and I agree. It is about, to me, it's all about super aggregation and this user-centric approach, and content owners just have to be able to continuously be flexible, move that content between the windows, and also offer advertisers more variety and diversify options to create advertising campaigns.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you. Great speaking to you and understand these dynamics. And I see Helen's back on the screen. So
I wish I wasn't. I just realized we've only got 1 minute to go, but that was, honestly, thank you so much, Kasia and Jenn and Daniel. That was such an interesting conversation. Like, I kind of got lost in the time, but we really, really appreciate your views and just so many insights that you've been able to share. And it feels like 5 minutes, but I think it's been a good 30 minutes. So yeah, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for everyone joining us today. And we'll make sure that we share the full report with you, and hope to have you both back very, very soon. But before the 2 years is up, to talk about what the next stages are. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.